So on our
Well,
website, it
now
says
you're
it's
live.
wrong. It says it's wrong on there. So can you see me?
What? Now I can see you.
During the presentation, are we allowed to ask questions, or would you prefer to wait till the end?
I mean, I really don't mind. I'm here for you guys. So I set aside question and answer at the end, but
Just write them down.
You won't get on
Ask at the
TV.
end.
Hey-o.
We are officially live. We
Okay.
can see you. Okay, now we can see you.
All right.
Hey, John Paul.
Oh, hi, John Paul. Okay, thanks you guys for joining and those of you that showed up tonight. So this is Tanner Lee with One Way Homes, and Tanner manages my property. So Marie and I wanted him to come and discuss property management with our group, and he's also one of our signature ambassadors on our webpage. Thanks, John Paul. So so we'll give it over to Tanner
awesome.
to discuss. So,
Perfect.
thank you.
guys. All right.
John Paul on? Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's saying hi. And Carolina's saying hi too. Hi, guys.
Perfect.
Yeah, Paul.
Thanks for having me tonight, guys. It's good to be with you. I speak at maybe 1 or 2 events a year, so this is fun to do.
Oh, but wait, I want to say that. I want to say something
Sure.
super quick about how I met Tanner.
I was
Because
gonna
of
go with
that,
that, but you
I know, but
Please
because
do.
of that, because
Take
our,
two. Take two.
our local RIA association in Arizona is phenomenal. And Tanner used to have a booth
That's
there.
where I met you.
And
Oh, yeah?
so the thing is,
Yeah.
this is how I felt about it. That if somebody's willing to put their neck out on that RIA thing, that I knew he was gonna be good, because like I say, I will say it again, our ASRIA, our Arizona Real Estate Investors Association is amazing. Both Prescott, Phoenix, and Tucson, all of them. And Alan Langston is on the national board out of Washington, D.C. So I know if anybody shows up there and puts their name in a hat and does the booth downstairs, that they have to be worthy. So
Yeah,
that's how we met.
appreciate it. Liz.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So I'll kind of give you just a little bit about me, and so you guys kind of know my background. I started property management about 7 years ago, when I was 20 years old. So I joined a property management company local, got my real estate license, and immediately started practicing property management that way. Started in the leasing division, slowly worked my way up into the role of signing up their clients. So I got a lot of exposure of, what people were looking for in property management, what their needs were with this company. And I worked with them for about a year and decided that I wanted to branch off and do it myself. So I became a broker about 4 years ago. And so got my real estate broker's license, started my own brokerage, which is now called One Way Homes. We manage about 200 properties all throughout Phoenix. We range between single-family homes, multi-units, and the biggest unit that we have, multi-unit, is 16 properties that we manage in Phoenix. So we kind of do it all. The majority of the properties that we do handle, though, are single-family units. But of course, if property has a tenant, we take care of it. So if you did the math, I'm 26 years old. I started when I was really young. Really, age is just a number. So if you're young, jumping into real estate, or older, jumping into real estate, there's really no bad time to do it. I'm an investor myself. I have multiple properties. In fact, I was telling Liz, I just closed on one about 2 months ago, just down the street on 14th Street in Dunlap, so just down the road, a multi-unit there. So for me, when it comes to investing your money, obviously I have a slight favoritism towards real estate, and there's just certain reasons. We'll go over it. In the end, you guys are all real estate investors, so there's going to be a little bit preaching to the choir, but hopefully, I'm hoping that some of my insight is kind of new for you guys, and even if it's something you guys know how to do, there's always certain ways that you can change the mindset of being more successful in real estate. And luckily for me, one thing that is kind of a personality trait of mine is I'm always learning, right? So always studying different avenues or different ways of investing in real estate, and going into that. So I'm not trying to be rude, I have notes on my phone, so I just wanna make sure that, I'm hitting every single kind of point that I.
Checking
Checking his
Facebook.
Yeah, going on the Instagram.
He's
really
like, I'm a
quick.
multitasker, I can present
Yeah,
and be on Facebook.
Exactly, exactly right.
Well, I
So-
was going on my phone to respond to comments on Facebook because it's hard for me to type on the little iPad over there. So, John Paul originally.
At least we know it's got
Can you
sound.
Slide that just a little bit further towards.
This, which
Yeah,
way?
towards him. Towards
Okay,
him.
and then if we have questions, you guys, you have to say them really loud.
Okay.
Perfect. So there's 3 points I really want to chat about. I don't want to take too much time, but just 3 different points to discuss. First one is why invest in real estate. You know, the key points of out of all the things out of all the assets you can put your money into, why are we choosing real estate? And why is what benefits does real estate have compared to stock market, bonds, all of those different avenues that you can invest in. So, you know, as we all know, traditionally, there is a little bit more protection that we are given when we are investing in an asset or something tangible, right? If that's, you know, gold or real estate, you know, that we're in, tangible, real property is something that is commonly protected more than if you're putting your money in real estate, or sorry, in the stock market or bonds or anything like that, you know. So, but with that piece of investing comes a lot more liabilities, and we'll go over how to kind of limit those liabilities a little bit. But for me, from what I've studied, real estate is a little bit more of a conservative route, but when done properly and in a long-term gain, could be really beneficial. So. One aspect of real estate that I really like when it comes to real estate investing is that it is not protected, but it flows with current inflation and deflation. So if you understand that with rental properties, you'll obviously, as a lot of us may know, there's equity that will build, but then you also have rental income that's coming in as well. And typically, not just the equity or the value of your asset is being protected, but the rents as well, your return is going to be invested as well with inflation. So a lot of the times you have money in a stock market, but obviously that money, depending on what product you have, is not paying you as well as what your returns on investment in real estate could. But then, as you know, equity will build in your real estate portfolio, but that return and that payments will also be risen. It'll continue to rise due to inflation, which is for me, a very convenient protection that is offered through real estate that a lot of other investments won't have as well. So does that make sense a little bit? Something that's commonly overlooked as well. So the other thing as you guys most likely know, is you can have a rental property, and if you do see any sort of decline in a market, or any sort of correction in a market or anything like that, you will still have an asset that is paying you, that is locked in for an X amount of time, that is still paying you, even though the value of your investment may be going down, the returns will still stay the same. And that's one thing that I like as far as the difference between long-term real estate and short-term real estate, is the long-term real estate has you locked in for maybe a year, maybe 18 months, 2 years, where you're able to get those returns back. Compared to any of those other investments as well. So, one other aspect that I like about real estate and why I invest in real estate is that you do have a lot more control in your investment. So obviously, I mean, if you have a lot of money in the stock market, if you kind of like me, I have mutual funds, but I also play a little bit of cash in like Robinhood or whatever it is. You never know. Like first thing I do, I wake up, I check emails. And I go on Robinhood to see how much money I'm up or how much money I'm down, right? It's kind of a game that I play with, right? I have enough in there where I'm willing to lose it just by playing, you know what I mean? So, but with real estate, you have a lot more control, right? You have the ability to control your returns on investments. So for example, if you have a rental property and it's becoming vacant, you have the ability to choose whether or not you want to maybe update a kitchen, or maybe update the insulation, or make cosmetic repairs, or maybe needed repairs that could give you a higher return on investment on the rental funds. Where a lot of the times you don't have that control, if you stick money in the stock market or other bonds or anything like that, you're not really able to control that money as well as what you can in real estate, right? So, and
Yeah,
it
you're
comes-
not usually invited to those CEO meetings, you know?
Yeah, exactly. As much as we wish we were sometimes, maybe not. But that control is a big piece of things. It helps you understand, or it helps you really choose what returns you want to make. And even if you may lose returns based on certain decisions you make, for me, there's a feeling of having that control that makes you feel a lot better with, putting up money towards your investment. So the other thing as well that you have control over is like your tenants, having tenants, and we'll go over the value of a tenant towards the end, but being able to choose who is going to really pilot your investment is a huge deal. And obviously we know, and we'll go over more, a tenant will make or break the success you have in real estate as well. So, any questions on that? What was that, Liz?
Oh, don't they?
Yeah, right.
I just, that, okay, so just real quick.
Sure.
I know, but that guy that was the crappy guy
Yep.
in my place,
Yep.
I didn't realize he put a review on Google.
Yep.
That now, it's like 3 years ago. Now I'm like, I gotta get that off.
Yeah, and we can chat a
He
little
was
bit about that,
crazy.
but there's,
He was crazy.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Anyway.
I'll just chime in real quick because I had some rentals in New York before I moved
Sure.
here, and New York being a
Rent
very
control,
tenant-friendly state,
Yeah,
I literally had, and my husband was just telling this story to someone, so it's like 2 bungalows on one lot, right? The back tenant, the guy was just like, I lost my job, so I'm just gonna stop paying rent. And you really can't evict him. And in the middle of the winter, you have to pay all the utilities. You can't let them be there freezing. You can't stop paying the water bill. You
Yeah.
can't do any of that. And so the front tenant actually called my husband to say, I just watched the back tenant take a circular saw to his hand and literally cut, I think, 2 fingers off of his hand so that he could show up in court and say, I can't work, so I need to live here for free. I'm not even lying.
well,
This
luckily
is
I've
not
never
a
had
made up
tenant
story.
that go.
That's a crazy.
That is not a made up story. He got about another 8 months rent free for pulling that off.
Wow.
And in court, my husband was like, no, you don't understand. My other tenant can come here and testify. She watched him do that. And the
Sure.
judge still said, he can't work. You can't
Sure.
kick him out. Because of the laws in New York. So
Yeah.
I just want to preface where we're in a much better
Luckily-
landlord-friendly
Yep.
environment.
Arizona is definitely one of the most landlord-friendly states that we have in our great country.
Stay that way.
So, yeah.
With the
it's-
right contract.
With the right contract, yep, exactly. But I've found the very few times that my brokerage has gone to court over tenant issues. As long as you're doing things properly and in the right way. Arizona's a very straightforward, hey, are you obeying your contract? If not, you're not gonna be rewarded. So they don't reward people that are breaking contracts, which is good. And that'll also come against the landlord if you're not obeying your contract as well. So that's where we'll chat a little bit more as well.
Will you go over any of like the little addendums that you maybe add to contracts that most people don't think about?
Yeah, so I use the standard Arizona Association of Realtors contract. I've just found that that is the strongest contract, and we've had, with brokers and real estate agents, we pay dues to have lawyers and the best of the best lawyers review these contracts to make sure they're as strong as they can be. So why not implement that, right? A lot of other management companies, they use their own contracts. For me, it's just as simple as using the strongest contract as we
Do you
have.
add addendums?
I do. So I have 2 addendums. I have a crime-free addendum, which pretty much states that the tenant is not allowed to pretty much perform any sort of crime in the property, and that if they do so, they're deemed to automatic eviction or cancellation of the contract if any crimes are taking place in the property. So that's just an extra protection, even though. Go ahead.
Is that like if they get
like, have police contact come to the property because of that?
Correct,
illegal
or if
action?
there's any sort of theft in like a multi-unit, or there's any sort of,
Drug use.
drug use,
Brothel.
exactly right.
No
So,
brothels
or
allowed.
even, one thing that's really big is the use of marijuana. So even though Arizona has deemed it legal to use recreationally, it's still illegal on the federal level. And so there have been cases federally that even though these states have it legal, federally it is illegal, so it's still not allowed to be used on the property of landlords. So they're still not
And is
allowed
that
to.
in your, part of your addendums that you add to
Yep.
your contract?
So I
about
have-
no marijuana use? in-
Correct, yeah, so I do have one, so I have, my contract has specific points, that we follow in my brokerage, for example, if they break their lease, they're required to forfeit their security deposit, and they're required to pay up to 2 months of rent. So we find another tenant in, so really that's protecting the landlord, so if a tenant does break their lease, they're not gonna be out on vacancy, vacancy costs money. So stuff like that, we cover cleaning, move out cleaning, responsibilities, carpet cleaning, house cleaning. We cover unauthorized occupants, unauthorized pets, that may be in the property. Little things even like leaving garbage cans full when they move out of the property. No tenants like to move into a new property with garbage cans full. So we require that for our tenants to have the garbage cans empty before their move out. And then we also cover the marijuana. We cover their responsibilities or instructions to reach out to us if there's any mold, or if there's any sort of maintenance issues. They have responsibilities to reach out to us immediately, so those, leaks or anything like that that could cost the owner more money, if those aren't addressed immediately. Yep, so, yeah, so those are very important for us. That happened to us about 3 weeks ago. We had a tenant that neglected to tell us there was a leak in a storage basement underneath the home. And when we checked it out, there was 2.5 feet of water
Oh my
that
God.
was in the storage basement and a ton of stuff. Yeah, and then what ended up happening is we filed with insurance, but then insurance didn't cover it. So the restoration company and all these bills, the owner had over $30,000 in bills that the insurance company wouldn't cover. So,
Why wouldn't insurance cover it? Did they not have the
because
right
they
insurance?
deemed it as wear and tear, and it could be a different, it could
Remember,
be a different.
insurance companies are in it to make money, not to help
Exactly.
us. It's not, they're
How
really.
is 2.5 feet of water wear
I
and
mean,
tear?
Insurance,
It's
yeah.
probably because of the peril and when it happened and it wasn't.
Exactly,
It wasn't
there's a
very
lot of
waterwork
lot of different things that it can be technical. I
There's a
don't-
loophole, it was Tuesday and it was windy and they don't cover it that day.
Exactly.
Was it one of the rain times?
No, the leak was due to, it was the shower pan, and the drain had broke for the excess water, and so just through that drain, it just started leaking, so.
And so you couldn't do anything to the tenant, though?
So, in that case, it's very tricky to do anything to the tenant,
Yeah.
because obviously we saw that with the amount of water, there was, because obviously it was going on for a long time.
Neglect.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
must have known.
Exactly. You would hope they knew, but at the same time, there's not really any sort of recourse, just because they could say they didn't know. And so we had to cancel their lease because we had to tear out the entire subfloor and redo the shower, and there was only one bathroom in the unit, it was a 2-bed, 1 bath, and so they couldn't use another bathroom, so we couldn't keep their lease intact. So, and now we just have it back up in the market after all that work, so.
Did you have to put the tenants up in another place?
We were about to, but then we offered them to be released out of the lease to go find another place, and that's what they decided to do.
Okay, so real quick, I don't wanna forget to ask this question based
Sure.
on all that too, because what about, and I know you're gonna talk about this, and we
Sure.
talked about it earlier, but, rental arbitrage with the Airbnbs. Would you allow anybody to then rent a place from you and then re-rent it to somebody else?
Absolutely
and
not.
have-
So
okay.
that's actually illegal to do in Arizona unless the landlord is giving, sublease. That's considered a sublease. So my very first property when I started my company,
Wait, that's illegal in
it
Arizona?
is illegal.
Yeah.
It's
So if
illegal
you
to
don't have a contract that
sublease.
says to sublease.
Oh,
You
okay.
have to get permission to sublease.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's in the Arizona
Thank you.
contract, the Arizona Association of Realtors. Excuse me, my very first property, But I signed up, my very first. He hired me with the issue that the tenant was subleasing on Airbnb. And so we had to evict him because he wouldn't stop. I mean, that's actually a very big deal right now, where a lot of people are going out to rent out these properties for $3,000 a month because they analyze it and know that they can make $5,000 a month by putting it in, and they supply the furniture, so they're paying the lease, thank you. It's a big deal, and they won't tell you. So I have a rental property in the Biltmore. It's right off Biltmore Estates, right off 24th and Camelback. And it rents out, I just re-rented it out, and I rented it out for $7,000 a month. And I was literally 9 out of the 10 people reaching out to me were people wanting to rent it out to then
As a
Airbnb.
vacation.
As an
As a
Airbnb,
vacation.
to do
Because
that.
it's a 6-bedroom, 6-bathroom, 6,000 square foot home with a pool, landscaping, a tennis court, everything. And
That
it would
sounds like
rent,
30,000 a month.
yeah, it would rent out for more if it wasn't from the 80s and still built
it's
in
not
the 80s.
Hey, there's people in this group that can reno it.
Yeah, right? Yeah, but it's probably $1 million.
Marie's like,
rental.
"Are you
You can go look at it right now on Zillow if you want. So it's definitely, it has a lot of character and, but yeah, a lot of people want to reach out, and we had someone that didn't disclose it, and then they submitted their application, and when we were about to move forward with them, I said, listen, I just need to make this clear, absolutely no subleasing Airbnb, or else we will go to court. And then they said, yeah, that was our plan. And they tried to hide it, and then when I said, we'll go to court and we'll kick you out immediately if we find this out, then they told us it was gonna happen, and then they backed out, so. Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
very interesting game, so just be careful for that. I mean, you know, I've had some properties where landlords have come to me, my clients, and they said, well, why don't we do it? And my simple answer is, why would you allow someone else to do it when you could do it? You know what I mean? You could make the money.
Right?
So why would you allow it? And the other problem is, let's say, for example, let's look at this scenario. Let's say you allow that situation to happen and the AC goes out while an Airbnb tenant is in there. Well, the Airbnb tenant then calls Airbnb or whoever, they call the landlord, they call their landlord, which is really your tenant, and then we're obligated by Landlord-Tenant Act to address certain issues immediately. But then if our tenant, which is their landlord, I know it's kind of confusing, but if we're not able to correct the issue quickly, then they're going to be liable and then they can countersue. I mean, it's just a mess.
Take a web.
Yeah, absolutely, it's just a mess.
We're not gonna do
So,
We're not gonna get into rental arbitrage.
yeah, so
No.
we don't want that.
Is there, I mean, obviously for the AC, there's landlord requirements, but is there any way for you to put in your contract that states that the tenant is required to pay all maintenance and everything?
That's a great question. So
that wouldn't put you in that particular situation?
So technically, no, because you may have certain provisions, but in the end, the Landlord-Tenant Act is what we're governed by. So you can't have anything that will contradict that. So for example, by law, you have to give 48 hours notice for entering. Well, if I put in my contract that I want 24 hours notice, that's not enforceable because they have protected rights through the Landlord-Tenant Act. So I'll tell you a little bit of story on that. So about 2-3 years ago, there was a situation where, and a lot of landlords do it, where landlords will have a home warranty, and that home warranty cost will be that $75 service fee, right? Well, a lot of landlords, they like to stay out of the maintenance, so what they'll say is, the tenant is now responsible to pay the $75 service fee and then they'll give them the access to the home warranty. Because the landlord will say, hey, it's easy. I don't have to make a phone call, I'll just give them and I'll have the credit card on file, they'll just charge me the $75, or sometimes they'll even say the tenant is responsible to pay the $75. Well, there was a situation where in Arizona, there was an old couple living on Social Security, very strict monthly Social Security, and their AC went out in the middle of the summer. And they didn't have the money to cover the $75 service fee, and so they just simply didn't call. And the AC wasn't working for like a week, and the husband died because the AC wasn't on. And so the kids for this person then turned around and sued the landlord for requiring them to pay the $75 service fee. and the kids won. So at that point, even though it's not ever talked about, I never allow that in my contracts, even though a lot of the times, I would say probably 1 out of every 4 of my clients will ask me to put that in there, and I'll say, "We're
Okay,
not
so
gonna
wait,
put that
what
in."
did you ask? Because that's a good point, because I don't know that we do that with you now, but I know before, in contracts, we've put, you're responsible for the first $35 or something. They'll still call us for the service fee before we had a property management. But because sometimes it's their neglect, I put the diaper down the toilet, I did this, I keep doing it.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, you're responsible for the first $35 or whatever, because then maybe you stop and think, oh, maybe I shouldn't shove the diaper down the toilet again
Sure.
because
So
it keeps
so
overflowing.
even if it's
These
not.
are all
That's a
things,
real
go ask me
thing.
how I know, we're gonna start a podcast.
Sure. So even if it's not in the contract, if you find that the tenant is at fault for the repair, then they are obligated to pay. So unless it's in the case of wear and tear of the property, if the garbage disposal is already bad and they may clog it, but the disposal is already in a very poor state, then that can be a little bit, that can be debated. But in the end, it's important as a landlord to fix issues quickly to prevent further issues.
But what about
And
the
then-
people that are chronic with the issues, because they're just neglectful?
Sure. I mean, that's where it comes down to finding the right tenant. You know what I mean? But, and really, it is up to the tenant to be able to, they need to call you. And of course, there's obviously those tenants out there that can be a big pain in the butt, that will call you for a light bulb or for whatever it is. That's where it comes down to placing the expectations up front. And that's one thing that I specialize in as a landlord. When I'm renting out homes for my company, we set expectations up front. And it's kind of funny, but if you study, if you read like studies on children need, hear me out on this, children need structure.
Yes.
They need parenting and they need structure. It's not good for parents to kind of just not let their kids do whatever the hell they want. That's not good. They need structure, and that's kind of how a landlord-tenant relationship is. You need structure in the right way to make sure that they understand the terms of taking care of the property, while reaching out to us for any maintenance issues. But in the end, we also want the tenants to take care of the property like it's their own home. And that's one thing that I am a big component of, and that's one thing that is a very valuable piece to my company that I shoot for, is first off finding tenants that way, but in the end, a landlord has the ability to really create the path for the tenant to be successful. And I was going to go over this later, but let's go over it right now. So one thing that how I look at tenants is they're kind of like a business partner. So if you're going to go hire someone to work for your company and they're going to pay you $2,000 a month, you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to see if they have anything on their background check, if they're reliable, if they have good references, if they take care of their own assets. So for example, like this is funny, but one thing that I do, and thank goodness I still do it, and I do have a leasing agent that helps me too, but we show the home personally. A lot of companies out there, they're using a new device called a Rently lockbox, and what it is anyone can swipe their credit card, 99 cents, it verifies their information, the key opens up, and they can go walk into your home without any agent. And for me, it's
Terrifying.
I don't understand why a landlord would allow a property management company to do that. The answer to that is they don't know. Property management companies aren't really disclosing it. If they are, it's very quiet.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Has there been any like squatter
I think it's
situations with that?
Kendall, let me tell you a quick story on it. So,
I was about to
Get over
say
there
that's
an offer pad. I
so a
mean,
For
scammer,
99 cents.
yeah.
for
So
99 cents,
I got a hotel
tonight.
so a
Did you say
scammer
that
is
was called Rentley?
It's called Rently lockbox.
Okay.
And you know what's funny? And even on the MLS, when you're listing a home right now, and you have the ability to it's on Supra lockbox.
Yeah.
On Supra, as an agent, when you're putting a lockbox on, Rently is now actually an option to put it on, because companies these big like apartments.com or apartment hunters, or these huge companies that are nationwide that own millions and millions of dollars of real estate all over the country, they put these devices on just to make it easy for them. So, but then a lot of the local companies are doing it as well. I see it all the time in the MLS, and I cringe because, let me tell you a quick story. So a scammer got a code with paying 99 cents, got a code, went on, marketed the same home, and was giving this code to people, and then this lady ended up calling, this lady went through this fake application process, sent this guy security deposit and first month's rent, and then the day of move-in calls the management company and says, hey, where are my keys? I'm ready to meet you here. And they say, what are you talking about? And she sent $5,000 to some random person, thinking that was the person that was managing all the rental.
People are doing that with vacation rentals too.
Yep, it's absolutely crazy.
They're all gonna go to hell, I'm just telling you.
Then that lady ends up turning around and suing the management company for allowing that to happen. I don't know if she won or not, but even if you don't win that, it's still a pain in the butt to go into that issue.
And
So,
spend the money.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, going back to the tenant, so for me, a lot of the value that I see, and one thing, if you're either looking for a property manager, or if you have investments that you are managing yourself, it is so important to meet the tenant, and it's kind of like a job interview.
I think it's common sense.
It
You
is
get a
common
feel
sense.
for people. You're like, yeah, we have a gut for a reason.
But something as simple, this is what I was getting at, something as simple as seeing the car they drive up in and how are they maintaining their car. If their car is terrible, if it's beat up, if they're not taking care of that asset, how do I know they're gonna take care of your asset? Right? That's a very important piece. So there's a lot of value that comes from doing that process yourself. And if you have an agent that's doing your rentals, or if you're doing it yourself, then that's one thing I would strongly encourage you to do, is be there and meet. Even though, like, I have a property right now that's in Estrella Mountain Ranch in Goodyear. And that's an hour, that's like an hour and 5 minutes. I mean, I can go to freaking Tucson quicker than I can go to Estrella Mountain. But in the end, I have that home on the market, and I drive out there, and I'm going tomorrow morning for a 2-hour open house because it's that important to have that done. So, something I strongly encourage.
That quote is going down in history, by the way.
Which
Tenants that aren't taking care of their cars aren't going to take care of your house. That I just reposted that. That is going down in history.
Okay, but I have a question, because, and this isn't to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Because a lot of us, we're all in the same investor group, and that investor group offers properties for us to buy
Sure.
as rentals around the nation.
Sure.
And
Passive
there's
income.
passive income, okay? Both of those companies that do that always offer a 2-year lease, and they really screen their tenants. I
Sure.
know you do for me, it's
So
only
you're
1
saying
year.
they require the tenants to sign a 2-year lease?
2-year lease.
Okay.
So what's your take on
Yeah,
that?
so let's go over that. So it always comes down to dollars and cents. If you have a property that's only requiring a 2-year lease, but you're pushing people away for 6 weeks to get that 2-year lease, does that make sense? If your home is renting for $2,000 a month, and you're sitting on the market vacant for 6 weeks, that's $3,000.
Okay, but that's a good point.
So
'cause
you're telling me-
Yeah, but these are hot markets. These are hotter rental markets because one company's in Memphis and then they're doing Midwest property.
Sure.
They're really doing their research. And because we have one in
Yeah.
Jacksonville, Florida, so that's it. So that's what I just wondering, that's it. I
Sure.
get what you're saying right there, but
No,
what if it is a good
that's
market?
still, and there's zero, for me, 2-year leases are great. I have no problem, but for me, I don't like to limit myself as a landlord to certain tenants. It's the same thing with dogs. So let's say you have a strict no pet policy. Well, if you're pushing people away for 6 weeks for that strict no pet policy, and maybe the tenant's dog causes $600 of damage, typically you have a security deposit first that'll cover that. But why are you going to miss out on $3,000 worth of rent for this simple policy? And it all just comes down to outweighing your options and your highest return on investment. Now, I like 2-year leases, but I'll tell you this. I locked 2-year leases early 2020, and I locked 1-year leases. And the 1-year leases, we're raising rents because rents went up. Now, that's just when it comes down to investment real estate, that's a choice you're making. But I'll tell you that every single lease that we had come to renewal last year, we raise rent at least $50, if not $100 a month.
Okay,
And so you
with
don't get
that-
that opportunity in the 2 years.
Okay, and with that being said, let's just say, because of the rules now,
Sure.
2020, and you had a 2-year lease, and, you know, Joe Schmuckatelli or
Sure.
Joe Sack of Potatoes, as Dan Bongino likes to say, isn't paying now, and now
Sure.
you're in a 2-year lease, and they're like, woo-woo, I
Sure.
don't have to pay right now.
But the truth
so
is,
then-
Liz, that can happen with a 1-year lease.
Yeah.
Or a.
Right, I mean, but that's
any
where you're opening
situation,
yourself up.
even if you're in a month-to-month, the eviction process will be the exact same if you're in a month-to-month, or if you're in a 2-year lease, 1 month in. So it's still a pain in the butt that you're gonna have to deal with.
No, but I think you're specifically asking right now due to the CARES Act and stuff and
Yeah,
like not
due to
being
the
able to
CARES
evict
Act, I mean, you
Yeah.
kind of screw
tenants.
yourself if you're in a 2-year lease, because they could almost live there until the government decides they have to start paying again.
Not in Arizona. So there are still, we can go over that, and I'm not an attorney, but I'll tell you what's.
Disclosure,
Yeah.
he's not an attorney.
Not an attorney or
So
a
there are still ways in Arizona to evict, even with the CARES Act in place. One of them is the tenant has to show proof that they have been affected by COVID.
Right,
They can't just say, oh, I still have a job, I decided not to pay, and live there rent-free.
yeah.
The other thing is if you own your property free and clear, then there is no protection on the tenant. The only way that the CARES Act will be protecting the tenant is that if you have a government-backed mortgage. Okay, so I have a client that we were about to proceed with eviction, and we were completely able to do it because he owned his property free and clear. Even though that tenant did have problems with COVID and they lost their job, we were still able to proceed.
Which is crazy, because you'd think if you had a mortgage on it is where you need the help, not if you owned it free and clear.
Sure.
You
But
know,
it has to be
I
a
still have to
government-backed
pay a mortgage on
I'm
that.
sorry?
It has to be a government backed.
So if your mortgage is backed, government backed, and which practically all of them are with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, then you cannot proceed with eviction. So pretty much that's how Uncle Sam and our great government gets their hands
But
on
if we
things.
got the loan through a credit union.
Yeah, but if
might
they're
be-
selling it to, if they're still selling it.
Yeah,
then
yeah, I
they're
get
gonna-
that.
Yeah, so like any property that you may, if you have
But
property,
if it was the bank's mortgage, not,
yeah,
you could still evict.
you still could, correct. So like you're right, so credit unions, a lot of the times, they still hold those loans and they won't sell them off. Then you have recourse to go ahead and proceed with eviction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
And the only way to find out is to actually read who
client
they
provider,
sold it to
yep,
or.
exactly right,
Yeah.
exactly right.
All right, so I didn't mean to derail
It's
you.
okay.
So for your company, is it behoove you guys more to do a year-to-year lease than a 2-year lease? Cause then you can change the rent at that
So
point?
there's
Or month to
benefits to
month.
both. There's benefits, so let's say you do sign a 2-year lease and then the market goes to crap tomorrow and rents go down a little bit. But now, what's hard is rents aren't really gonna go
No,
down.
they're not gonna go
Right.
down.
We're not gonna see that. When people are gonna lose their homes, then that's another protection that real estate offers. People will always need to rent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, not your liability, but your due diligence will have to increase by finding people. And you're gonna wanna find the best tenant and maybe not ones that lost their homes or whatever it is. But in the end, that's what's nice about real estate is people will always need a place to live. So there are pros and cons. My big thing is, one thing that I was gonna chat about, and let's go over it, is one thing that a lot of landlords do not understand or do not know is vacancy is your #1 expense. So that's why I do like 2-year leases. Is because not only are you locking them in for 2 years,
Yeah, yes.
yep, but vacancy, it's not just missing out, let's say it sits vacant for a month, you're not just missing out on that $2,000, but you have leasing fees, right? A lot of the times, you're gonna have to maybe put in $300 or $400 or $1,000, or maybe Liz coming up here with Parkway, she's gonna have a little bit more to put in there, right? So, hate to put you on the spot. Yeah, but sometimes you have things that you're gonna have to, turn a little bit on the property. So vacancy can be very expensive. So for me, I do like 2-year leases, but I don't like to limit ourselves. But I can almost guarantee you, to be honest, a lot of the leases we did last year the majority of them were 2-year leases. And you know what's
So it
funny?
really depends on the property.
It depends on the property.
And I think the landlord, because like I would have done, I don't want him to do a 2-year on mine now, I don't know, I hope he didn't, but
No, yeah.
only want a 1 year.
Yeah, but a lot of the times, I'll tell you guys this right now. Everyone knows the condition of the housing market right now with sales. It is, I just saw there's 10 buyers for every 1 seller, okay? The rental market is no different. People do not want to leave right now because it is so damn hard to find another rental. You just can't do it. So a lot of the times tenants, like I have that leverage too as a landlord to increase rents, because a lot of times when you're in the middle of a lease renewal, it kind of comes down to you're kind of playing a little game. When it was a more simple market, you're trying to raise the rents, but at the same time, if they threaten to leave, it's never really worth the tenant to leave and experience vacancy for a rental increase. Now we know as a property manager, as you as a landlord, we know that they really don't want to leave. Moving sucks, and it's finding another home is even more crappy. And so you have leverage to raise those rents because we know they're not going to leave. So,
In regards to COVID happening,
Sure.
A lot of people gotten situations or couldn't find homes and ended up bunking with their friends or family. Is there anything you guys did at the beginning of COVID or now where you send out a memo saying, hey, just a reminder, nobody's allowed to be in your property for more than so-and-so amount of
Yeah,
days.
14
If
days.
anybody's going to be moving in, they need to be added to the lease. Like, did you
Sure.
send proactively, like, remind people
We
that
do.
they need to reach out
Yeah,
to you?
absolutely. So our company, we invest in a great software that allows us to send out, mass emails to tenants. We remind them of, air filters, soft water systems, all of these things that can be wear and tear on your property. We're sending them reminders to get those things done. But we sent out, first off, we sent out, if you remember, do you remember when COVID hit and you got an email from every single
Every
person you ever
company.
knew?
Oh, and that stupid word, unprecedented.
Yeah,
I
right?
heard that again.
Yeah, so
Unprecedented time.
This is unprecedented.
yeah, right. So we did send out emails just going over, certain protocols and that they were still responsible for rent and, that obligation is still there. One thing that we want, our philosophy with One Way Homes, my company, is we want the tenant to make your house their home. If we can cultivate that mindset with the tenant, they will take care of things themselves because it's their home. Just like I don't know if you guys rent or not, but if you own a home, you're not calling your landlord because you don't have one, but you're taking care of things yourself. And that's what we ideally want for tenants, is to take care of things themselves. And so that's another expectation we set up front for the tenants. But in the end, that comes with being a landlord that will listen, that will take care of the tenant. And that's one thing I wanted to go over as well, is there is a sense of investing in your tenant that every good landlord does. Because it goes back to a couple things. If you invest in your tenant, number one, you're investing in your tenant who will then take care of your number one investment, and that's your property. It's your home, right? So it's very important to invest in that tenant. And the ways to do that is, first off, be responsive. So respond to them within 24 hours. One thing for me personally with my company is I allow tenants to text me, but I always tell them to follow it up with an email. Because I do get probably 60, 70 text messages a day. It's pretty wild. And sometimes I'll see a text message, but they have to follow it up with an email. But I give them that opportunity to text me to add that little personal touch, so they can know, that they can text me and I can see that. But it's be responsive, be quick to take care of repairs. And even if you can't be quick, being communicative through those repairs, even if it may take 5 to 7 days, is really important. Just because if you can keep that communication up, then they're going to know that you're at least trying to take care of them. You know what I mean? In the end, if you invest in a tenant, they're going to want to stay longer. They're going to want to renew. They're going to be okay if you do end up raising rents a little bit. They're going to know that there's value there. There's value at renting from Liz or Mia, right? Mm-hmm. Mia or whoever it is from One Way Homes. There's value of renting there, and they're going to want to stay. So those are the little things that you have to understand will happen as a landlord if you are giving the time of day to your tenants. I'll tell you a quick story. So I had a landlord. First off, I have great clients. And what's great about where I'm at now as an owner of a company doing business is I can pick and choose who I do business with. When I started my company when I started One Way Homes about 4 years ago, I was still, 50, 60 properties, building on my clientele, and I would really take on anyone. Well, I had one client, a husband and wife that were just very hard to work with. Usually, sometimes tenants are hard to work with, but these owners were really hard to work with. They were moving out of state. It was really last minute. They hired me to manage. Well, what happened is they gave me the home worse than a tenant's ever given me the home. So they moved out and they said, okay, just clean it, do your thing, get it rent ready. This place was trash. Well, when I came to them and I said, oh, hey, listen, we got to do X, Y, and Z, they didn't like it because it cost money. And so we really cut corners to their request, and we did the necessary things to get tenants in there. Well, there were a lot of things, we got tenants in there, a lot of things tenants brought up to us in their move-in inspection. And I said, these are things that I even cited on the tenant for, because these are things that just there was animal feces on the wall and stuff like that, that we did everything we could, but the owner just would not want to paint the house. It was really bad. So anyways, luckily we had great tenants in there. But about 3 months in, their microwave just stopped working. And something simple like a microwave, they had a home warranty, so $75 phone call. When I called up the owners, they were livid that there was any sort of maintenance issue on their perfect home, right? It was really bad. And so I had to fight with them. Guys, they have to have a microwave, right? So finally, they, hesitantly, they decided to allow the microwave to be fixed. Well, something like 3 weeks later, their sprinkler box didn't have the key to open up the box, and they had to adjust the sprinklers. Well, the owner was adamant that they left the key there and that it was up to the tenant's expense to rekey it and do all of this.
Plastic ripping.
Yep, exactly. Well, a year went by. We were about to renew the lease, and then the owner called me and said, we have unexpected expenses. We need to sell the property. So we went over there, and what happened was the backyard was dead because the sprinkler box was broken. Okay? And so what we did is but the thing was the tenant knew. The tenant knew that that there was somewhat their fault, but even they were hesitant. So we took security deposit, we revamped the backyard, new sod, new plants, all of that. But then what ended up happening is the owners were so offended that the backyard was in the way it was, that they thought that every little thing wrong with the property was not the tenant's fault. What they did is they tried to go after the tenant for $10,000 worth of damages that the owners themselves were actually responsible for. Okay? And so what ended up happening is I've never done this before, but they were asking me to go after the owner or the tenants, and I immediately took myself out of the situation, which I was advised by legal counsel to do because they were asking me to do things that weren't honest. And so I told myself, hey, I can't manage your property anymore if you're going to do this. And so what ended up happening is, I spoke to the tenants, and they were sent a bill for $10,000. They fought it in court, and in the end, they weren't responsible for it.
Of course
But
not.
yeah, so I tell you that story first off with you guys understanding that if you neglect a tenant, there will be neglect on the property. It's almost inevitable that will happen. And even though you may be able to deem it as the tenant's fault, in the end, the landlord will have some sort of fault in it as well. Something as simple as a missing key in a sprinkler box caused $2,000 worth of damages, right? So that's really important to have a mindset of taking care of that tenant, because little things like a $75 service fee or a key can come a long way if you want the tenants to stay or take care of the property, getting that property back in the condition that you want.
So how are you reassuring that the filters are being changed and the sprinklers are working and they're actually...
Sure, no, that's a great question. So, and that's actually been something that's been a little bit more difficult due to COVID, because, yeah, I mean, we can still get in, but, I had 2 kids at home and I had a newborn. And so I had to find the right balance of getting in to do inspections, making sure homes are properly taken care of, and finding that right balance. So really, when it comes down to, we do our best to, and I wish I had a better answer on this, but we do our best to send out those reminders But in the end, it's really up to a tenant to do it. Now, here's some strategies that we do. So if an owner really wants their AC filters to be changed or their soft water bags, the salts to go into the soft water system, what we do is we advise the owners to buy the supplies and provide them at the beginning. And so what's nice about this is, first off, the tenants have the AC filters or the bags of salt. So then it's a lot easier for them to keep tabs on them or to get them done. But what's nice is when I come in and do that inspection around the 4-month or the 12-month mark, I know that there were 12 filters in the closet when we left. And if they've been there for 12 months and there's only 9 left, then they only replaced 3 of them in the last 12 months. So I'm able to measure that as a landlord to know if they're putting those filters in or not. Does that make sense?
You know, and that's interesting because it's not, I don't know where, how, who, or what, but I heard about that where some property management companies then have that as a service.
They do.
And then that's an extra fee, but they're coming in every month and
They do.
saying, on the 12th of the month, I come in and change your filter.
Yep, and so I have about 5 properties that the owners have, they've decided they've elected to buy that service, or it's like Filter Easy or something like that, that will send air filters every 2 months or every month. Now for me, my company, we do it as an incentive, but not an incentive, but as a marketing strategy. We do not like additional fees on the tenants. But let me go back to this really quick. A lot of owners like those Filter Easy products because then they can just send them in, and a lot of companies do that, which I think is great. But now, let me shift gears really quick. So a lot of management companies, if you're if you're looking into a property management company, or this is just good knowledge to have. A lot of management companies, right now they're charging additional fees on your tenants that you don't know about as landlords on the tenants. So for example, they charge 1.25% of the security deposit, and they're keeping 25% of it. So if you have a $2,000 a month home, they're automatically charging $2,500 security deposit and keeping that extra $500. Now, if you have a home on the market and it's your home and you're with one of those management companies and people are looking at that cost, you're with them or you're with One Way Homes or any other person that's not charging that, tenants are going to go to One Way Homes or whoever is not charging those fees because obviously they don't want to pay that crap. And in the end, it's going to your home's going to rent out sooner because you're not charging those tenants those fees, right? But it's not just that. They're charging 5% admin fees on their rent. So what happens, every city in Arizona, in the valley, they have a municipal renter's tax. So for example, Scottsdale is 1.75, Gilbert is 1.5, Mesa is 2%. It's all different. It's a TPT sales tax. What's happening is these companies are charging a flat 5% on the tenant, on the monthly rent. They're processing whatever it is, and then they're keeping the remainder.
Would that be in a contract?
It is in the contract.
But you gotta read it and find
But
out.
the tenants, yeah, so any landlord is required to disclose what they're charging on the tenants. So I disclose to my tenant or my owners that, hey, I charge a $50 late fee, I charge a $250 unauthorized occupant or pet fee, stuff like that. So I disclose those. Now, if you have a 10-page contract, it's up really to the salesman or whoever is signing you up to really disclose those little things. But that's one thing I'll tell you, when I worked for a management company, I was being told not to really disclose those things because landlords don't like it. They don't like the idea, and I'll tell you, I've seen it. It is ridiculous. Go on Zillow right now and look at rental listings. You'll see 5% admin fee, 1.25% security deposit, 25% refundable or non-refundable, $200 admin fee, $10 Filter Easy fee, $30. I mean, guys, it's nuts. And I can tell you that tenants hate it. If tenants feel like they're being nickeled and dimed, they will not appreciate your rental as much.
Yeah.
So I can tell you this.
Somebody online had a
Yeah.
question, going back to what you were talking about with the property checks and stuff.
Sure.
They want to know, do you put it in your contract that the property management can do those checks, and if so, how often?
Yeah,
So how often are you
so
guys
what I
doing it?
do is I offer one free inspection a year. And then what I do is any inspections above that is $75. But typically, like my strategy is I'll do an inspection around the 4 or 5 month mark, and that one inspection will give me a lot of knowledge about the property and the tenant. Okay.
Like what their car is.
Yep, exactly, right?
I know, I'm like, check out that car.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully I catch the car before then. But if I go in and the home is in really good shape, in an acceptable condition, then I won't do an inspection until the renewal or the year mark, which is typically either 1 year or the renewal period. And then what I do is I charge $150 lease renewal, and that goes over rewriting the contract, raising the rents, and doing an inspection as well. So I charge $150 to do
Yeah,
that.
that's good. I didn't know that.
But anyways, so that's typically what I do, and I do put that in the management agreement.
So that 150 though is for the landlord or for the tenant?
I charge the landlord to do that
Got-
service.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, because I know I need to ask this.
Go
I
ahead
have
and
no
write your
idea.
check.
Pools and landscaping.
Sure.
Do you do that?
Yep,
on
so-
larger properties?
100%, I won't actually take on a client unless they agree that the landlord covers the pool service.
Oh,
So the reason being is pools can be a lot of liability if they're not taken care of properly. The $100 a month rent that you can include in the rent,
Yeah.
sorry, the $100 maintenance, pool maintenance that you can then add into the rent is absolutely worth it.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
because then going back to the control that you have in your investment, then you have control to make sure that that is being done properly. So we do that. Landscaping is one of those that you can include or not include. Now, I'll tell you, pretty much all of my homes that I manage in Scottsdale, Biltmore, Paradise Valley, some in like high-end Mesa that rent out for like $3,000 plus a month, we will include landscaping, just because at that price point, a lot of people enjoy that and they like that landscaping service. And at that price point, a lot of people tend to not even do their own landscaping and they're hiring it anyways. And so we just include that in the rent and add it on, so, yeah.
woo!
So Tanner, back when you were saying that you might have the landlord provide the filters or the
Sure.
salt bags at the beginning, and then if they're not being used,
Yeah,
who would you say would be liable if like the salt bags weren't being used and the water system goes out?
yeah,
Is that a
so,
way to?
so yeah, what's hard is, and this is what comes down to making sure you're doing your move-in inspection properly. What's hard is, it can be very difficult to pretty much put the issue on the tenant. So for example, I'll tell you like what I see a lot of, I get a ton of AC calls in the summer, okay? If I get an AC call, I send my technician out, and they can see that the AC filters have not been changed, and the charge is, the service, put a new filter in, all that is $350, I will absolutely charge that on the tenant. No questions asked. If there is proof that an AC filter has been neglected, then there is 100% ability for me as the landlord to charge that back on the tenant, okay? Same with the salt water system. If the owners know the condition of the salt water system and it hasn't been properly taken care of, then we can absolutely go after that. So the problem is, I'll give you a scenario. I have a property that I managed. I've been doing management for this client for about 3 years now. They've been self-managing this property for the last 5 or 6 years. They just recently had a tenant move out and I took it over. Well, they have a soft water system and the tenants moved in and this soft water system just has not been maintained. And so when I had a plumber go out and they gave me the quote of either bypass it or replace it or whatever it is, the owners came back to me and they said, well, should we have the tenant pay for it? And I said, well, listen, you've had a tenant here that you guys have been managing for the last 5 years. I have no history of this property and it's in really bad shape. It's obviously not bad shape like the last 3 months bad shape. This is like the last 5 years neglect bad shape. So we cannot go after the tenant for it. You know what I mean? So it's just those important things that you as landlords need to be aware of and keep tabs of your home or have a professional keep tabs of your home to make sure that those little things that could cost you $500,000 a year, you're able to limit those liabilities.
So is the service for the air conditioner included in the rent, or is that the landlord's?
That would be a landlord
That's
expense.
a yearly,
Yep.
which is smart.
Yeah. So a lot of landlords, I'll tell you, like the landlord that I manage 25 properties for, he has me do annual checkups, and my guy will do it for $79, and he'll just go and tune in and make sure that the AC is in good condition, and really that that, I mean, we're bringing in 25,000 in rents for him, you know,
Yeah.
so,
Let's do it.
a month, so it's important for him to, that's a good investment for him,
Yeah.
so.
How do
And a
you
lot of
handle-
a lot of home warranties will actually give you a free monthly service. And if you know that the home warranty companies are giving a free annual service. They're giving a free annual AC checkup because they know that service is valuable because they're gonna be liable for any AC repairs as well, so. Sorry, go ahead.
How do you handle credit? Because most people that are renting, or a lot of people are renting, have bad credit.
Yeah.
They rent.
That's a great question. So I have
Wait,
my.
repeat it in case people couldn't hear it.
Oh, yeah, so how do we handle credit? So when tenants apply, what are our credentials, if that's what you're asking? So in the end, the owner has the ability to set their own credentials. So even though I have like a baseline for my company, which is a 600 credit score, income needs to be at least 2.5 times greater than the rent, no open bankruptcies, no past evictions. Any eviction, I don't care if it was 20 years ago, you can find someone else. You know what I mean? So I would never accept any eviction. Anything like that, I have my own, like I just went over, those are my qualifications. Now, if Liz comes to me and says, hey, Tanner, I want someone above a 625 with 3 times the income for the monthly rent, in the end, I represent Liz, so I'm gonna follow through with those. But it's just important. Now, I found when it comes to specifically credit, is the score isn't as necessarily important as what I've seen on the report, right? So I've seen reports that are way worse than some scores where they're, at a 550 score, but they maybe gone through a bankruptcy, so their score is at 575, but they have 0 debt now because of their bankruptcy, where I've seen scores at 635, but they have 7,000 of past due debt or anything like that. So really, it just comes down to a situation by situational issue. Going over that report and everything. Now, what I do as a landlord, which is important to me, is I collect all the information on the applicant, and then I call the owner, and we discuss it together. And in the end, the owner has the decision. But a lot of the times, 9 times out of 10, the owner is going to ask for my professional opinion and go for that. But for me,
Too, if you've met them and have that gut.
of course, absolutely. But then I offer a tenant guarantee. So if your tenant gets evicted within the first 12 months, then I will then turn around and re-rent that home out for free. And so that actually happened, or not evicted, but even break their lease. So that happened with Liz once. Some guy ended up moving to the East Coast, our great tenant, But in the end, I turned around and I rented our home for free, just because he broke his lease after like 9 months. So in that case, he paid. So what's nice for her is we actually raised the rent. We got a crappy tenant out of there. But she didn't have any lapse in rent because he continued to pay the rent. I rented our home out for free and we just did an empty lease. So
Okay, it's getting late.
Sure.
And so Tanner, we really appreciate this.
of course,
So can you, and we'll put it on this stuff,
sure,
but can you give us your information again?
of course.
And I don't know that it's a fair question to ask your fees and what, and
Sure.
just get on your site
Yeah,
and see that, or set up a call with you or
Yeah.
something, but make sure you put it on here, and then Maria and I will make sure it's absolutely on our
yeah,
page. and
yeah.
everything.
So no, that's totally fine. I don't put my costs on the website. Just, that's kind of one of those things that a lot of property managers don't do because to be fully transparent, I want people to call me and discuss my services. But typically I charge $85 a month. For Liz and all of her friends and all of that, since I originally signed her up, it's $75 a month. So $75 for anyone. I charge a flat.
Long-term and short-term, or how?
Just-
So,
Oh, he only does long.
Oh, he only does long-term,
He
okay.
didn't
So-
get into that.
well, I can answer that really
I know.
quick. So I'll do a short term, but I don't do furnished. Okay, so I don't do any sort of furnished rentals. But a lot of the times, what's that, Liz?
Like an
Like an
Airbnb.
Or Airbnb, exactly.
I'm just saying, she wasn't here when.
You don't do
That's okay.
long-term furnished rentals at all?
I don't do long term either. So furnishings, the problem is there's a lot more wear and tear, a lot more liability, and I just don't have those resources to make sure that I'm doing my best representing you to cover
Got it.
those. So I just can't offer that. So I don't want to offer
That's
a service I
interesting
can't
for
do.
you and for
So-
Marie.
So what I do is I charge $75 a month. That's for your monthly management. So rent collection, accounting, processing the renter's tax, maintenance, 24-hour service line for your tenants, all of that jazz, I charge $75 a month flat, taken out of the rent, okay? When it comes to leasing on your home, I charge a flat $750, and that's taken out of your first month's rent. That covers the photography, it covers me showing your home personally or my leasing agent, it covers the application processing, going over all of that, presenting it to you, the move-in, lease write-up, that entire process, I charge $750. Now, there's a lot of the
Is
times.
that only
we'll-
on the upfront or what about with the renewals?
So renewal's $150.
That's right.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So the $750 does not include an MLS fee if we decide to put it on the MLS. So a lot of the times we'll put it on the MLS, which will just expose it to, agents and their clients. Typically, I have a threshold of about $2,000. If your home's gonna rent for more than $2,000, I highly recommend putting it on the MLS. Typically, there's not a whole lot of money in rentals on the MLS.
Yeah.
And so typically, it's like a $250 referral fee that we'll typically pay for an agent to bring their client. And so, in that case, it's a lot better to pay the $250 fee to get someone in 2 weeks sooner, because you're making more money. So if you're paying a $250 fee on top of the $750 referral, that's about $1,000 to rent out your home, $150 lease renewal, and then I do charge a $300 reserve, which is your funds that we hold in escrow, just in case there are any maintenance issues. We jump into that reserve. So for example, if Liz has a $120 repair, we pay it out of the reserve, and then the next month's rent will fill up that reserve back to $300, and then we deposit the remaining funds to Liz. So, okay. And then what's nice is you guys work with me directly, so I'm the broker, the owner of the company. I do have a team, but all my clients, all my owners work with me directly. My tenants work with me as well, or my assistant as well, but that's one thing you get a lot of value working with me, and
What
I
about college
take pride in that.
rentals?
I'm sorry?
What about college rentals where each one has their own lease?
So I don't do that. So
You don't
every
do it.
property has to have one lease. So
Okay.
I have a few in Tempe. College rentals are very fun, to put it. The thing about college rentals is you're almost guaranteed a turn every year. Tenants will only stay 1 year, because you have kids in there. But typically, I have one property that it's always college students, but it rents out for a lot of money, even though it's a really worn property. But it has a pool, has 4 bedrooms, and in the end, college students, they price
Ours
it.
has a basement.
Does it? Yeah.
Basement.
College students, they price it based on the bedrooms. So it's standard to pay $600 a bedroom, $700 a bedroom. So if it has 4 bedrooms, you're able to collect that $2,400 or whatever it is, if not more, if you have a sexier property with bells and whistles.
But you wouldn't do it.
I'm sorry?
You wouldn't,
You would
Split it?
manage one,
Manage.
but not,
yeah, they each
You'd
have
write
their
the
own
one
lease. You
lease.
I would only do one lease, and that's for your protection. Because why should you miss out on rent if one person leaves? They should all be committed to it. So I don't collect separate rents or anything like that. So a lot of the times, the majority of the times with those college rentals, one person will pay the rent and then everyone else Venmos them or Zells them or whatever. But then I'm only collecting one payment, and that's for your protection as an owner. So, that makes sense?
One last question about
Sure.
rents. When it comes to increasing rent,
Sure.
I know that you say like $50 or $100 is sometimes you increase the rent. I know there's a maximum, or is there a maximum in
There's
Arizona?
not a max.
So you can increase rent as much as you want?
Yeah, you can, but I mean, it's at the
Well, yeah.
discretion of the tenant re-signing.
Yeah.
yes, maybe you want them
So-
out.
Do you do a percentage?
Yeah.
Like, do you have it?
I don't do a
Is
baseline
there a
percentage.
lease?
What I always do in a lease renewal is I do an analysis, or I analyze the property, and then I'll see, okay,
Comparative
this
rent.
property is renting at right now $1,750. The comp is renting for $1,950. Now we can go for that $200 increase, or we can kind of go in the middle at $100. We can be as aggressive as we want, but at the same